talk about want. And well, I am not a specialist in sustainability or in ethical design. I am a visual designer first. I've been working in graphic design for many years, and then I moved to interaction design and experience design. But I work at Frog, and the mantra of Frog is form, follow, motion. And that's really what resonates very well with me, not just because I work for them, but also because it's really what it's like a silver lining across all of my work and the things that I like. And yeah, I like to observe things and people in general. So I like to consider what happens in society and innovation as one same thing. And thinking about the reasons of why we do things in the way we do, why we cannot change when we should be changing, for example, and how can I impact any of these through the work that I do. So what I have, what I'm thinking about at the moment is really that we are a little bit trapped as a society in a dimension of comfort. And I'm going to open another chapter to parallel to the ones that have been already opened by the other panelists online. But really, we are trapped in a dimension of comfort because we want everything, or we expect everything to work in just one click, as smooth as possible. So I don't know you, but I have got many briefs asking to design the customer experience possible, user experience possible. Beautiful. However, I feel very guilty for that, because if I look at how nature works, for example, there is no evolution, or nothing can grow, thrive, and exist without discomfort. You know, a tree cannot grow without breaking its own bark. A child cannot be born without causing discomfort to his mom. And we cannot have fruits without killing flowers. So we are the only species on this planet that somehow believes we can't be here without any discomfort. So I think this is coming with some downsides that we can all see. For example, the lack of physical human interaction caused by all of these one click away experiences, et cetera, that we all design at some point in our life. But also, so the question for myself is, how do I want to bring value into my work? And thinking about this, I think there is one way in particular. So I think that as a designer, we cannot change outcomes if we don't change the input. So I'm looking at our own ways of working as well. And comfort is also there. We have designed many alignment workshops or tools for fast decision-making, things that are keeping us, our brains, in a dimension of comfort. We keep on playing within a field that we have limited to that. So my part of my investigation at the moment is, how can I break this and bring back the creative potential that we have put to bed in favor of comfort? So we don't challenge big ideas. We don't get into big discussions with our clients. Otherwise, we lose the budget, or maybe then we are delayed or whatever. So somehow we have accepted a sort of compromise that I think it's damaging the way we think and the potential of the ideas we come up with. So that's where I am at the moment.
Very good. Thank you.
Adrengo.
Okay. And was the audio okay for everybody online?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So me next, yeah? Okay. So hi, everybody. Sean Carney. Up until about 6 months ago, I was the Chief Design Officer at Philips. Had the privilege of leading Philips Design for the last 12 years. I stepped out of Philips at the end of last year for reasons I won't go into right now, but happy to be enjoying some independence. And some of the things I learned during my time at Philips, which was very much built around human-centered design, as Don said. And Don came and very gracefully spent a whole day with us last year and talked to the team and saw the work that we were doing. So we had a lot of time together with Don to reflect on how do we go forward with human-centered design. And some of the things we were doing, we recognized, and I've now increasingly recognized as I've stepped outside of the corporate world, we were doing them for maybe with a good intent, but they weren't necessarily delivering good outcomes for the people we were aiming to sort things out for. So, you know, we introduced things like design hackathons, creative playgrounds, where we would bring researchers, technologists, and designers together to look at cool new and emerging technologies and figure out what we could do, find a need to satisfy with those technologies. We would do a lot of philanthropy projects, philanthropy by design, which again made us feel very good ourselves that we were doing things for the right reason. But if you then go down and check on things down the line, and did it actually result in a materially better outcome for the people, a better life, a better quality of life for people? Not necessarily. It was a pretty hit and miss kind of state of affairs. And, you know, as I've spent the time now outside of Philips regrouping, and I've increasingly looked at companies who are supposedly purpose-driven, brands which are purpose-driven, brands which are all about doing meaningful work. You see increasingly the ESG drivers that they've got are what's really driving them. They want to look good in the mind of the capital markets. They increasingly are being held accountable by those markets for sustainability, circularity, and their ESG commitments. But again, is sending an ambulance and parking it in the back of in Africa really impacting somebody's life? Sending an MRI down there that actually only gets used twice and then gathers dust because there was nobody to maintain it, or the helium vented on the first use and there wasn't any helium available in the county, in the country, in the continent to refill it. So again, I can report that in my corporate report, my annual report, but it's not improved the quality of life for anybody. So going back to the middle of last year, I was with a group of chief design officers from many other corporations, and we put our heads together and said, many of us are facing similar struggles here. We want to do good. We believe design can do good. We believe in the power of creativity to solve problems. But actually, in our day-to-day work, we just don't have the facility to do it because we are held accountable for deliverables around the P&L and performance reviews and things like that. So could we find a way that we could collaborate and actually do some impactful and meaningful work? But let's commit to avoid just creating another design theater platform where we all feel good at the end of a hackathon and nobody actually benefits from it. So we created a nonprofit, a registered charity called Design for Good. And you'll find it on designforgood.com. And I think Candice is going to send around a link to it. And we have somewhere in the region now of 1,000+ designers from 11 different corporate design teams participating in this. We've just finished our startup year. We produced about 150 projects in the first round, but when you started to go in and audit those and be very critical around them, we've ended up with about 25 projects that are resourced to win, that have commitment from non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross or UNHCR and various other ones on the ground that are committed to taking these ideas forwards and implementing them. Already we have materially impacted the lives of between 5 and 6 million people, and we calculate if we deliver all of these 25 projects, then we're getting close to 1 billion people's lives improved. Now, the kind of projects that we're talking about here are everything. Our focus is, I should say, is on looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 UN SDGs to tackle. Our first year, we focused on water and sanitation, so access to water and sanitation. And as you know, when you put a bunch of designers in a room and you say your brief is water, your brief is sanitation, we had a very, very diverse set of projects which emerged from that. Because what they did, as you would expect, is to go deep, to go local, to find out where the problems existed and what the real problems really were. So, for instance, in Bangladesh, where they've had horrendous problems with flooding, when you ask the 5 whys, when you go deep, you find out a lot of it can be brought back to the mangrove swamps and the ecological disaster around those mangrove swamps. So we had to go deep on that. We asked a lot of questions. We sent teams to find out more about it. When we started to talk about hygiene and access to sanitation in Indian urban slums, we found actually that there was a cohort in there who was suffering more than most. And guess what? That was the women. And it was prepubescent women. It was also mature women. And part of it was then spurned a project which was around period poverty. So inadequate access, inadequate training to what happens during girls going through the periods. Sorry, I'm getting tied up now with all the technical stuff. So we helped education. We put together education programs. We also built a series of startups where they could manufacture feminine hygiene products locally, which would create an ecosystem of small businesses that were able to deliver these in an ecologically sound way. Because guess what? The supposed developed world products that we send into these environments do not decompose, they're not biodegradable, and create a legacy problem in the ground for future generations. By manufacturing the things locally, using local materials, we're able to solve problems and not create a legacy problem as well. And then we had other issues, other challenges which have come up, such as corporates who've put money into entities like water starters, and I have Adam in the room I can point to in a moment, who worked on this project. But water starters was funded by a large corporate, and it was about drilling wells in Africa to give access to water. They would put in pumping equipment, filtration equipment, so that people would get access to clean drinking water. All great when you set off, but the minute that machine dies, the minute that machine needs maintenance, it wasn't getting the maintenance. So actually you run the risk of delivering what is supposed to be clear drinking water, but actually is now full of impurities. So we had a bit of a service design dilemma. So how do we then make sure that we can do preventative maintenance? How do we fix the UX around the machinery so that we have timely interventions from service engineers to ensure that people don't believe they're drinking clean water, but actually this thing fails over time? Anyway, there are 25 projects. You can go online on the website and see these. And we are actively pursuing with the various stakeholders, including the United Nations, UNHCR and others, to develop these into make sure that they are impactful and delivering the value that we always wanted through the next year. Next year, we will start the next SDG challenge, which is going to be SDG 4 around access to education. And what I'm trying to do right now is broaden the cohort. So beyond corporate design teams, I want agency design teams to come on board. In fact, I also want individual contributors who have something to say, something to contribute in this space to be as inclusive as possible. Yeah. And of course, to the earlier point, design alone will not deliver the solutions. We need full stack developers, we need engineers, we need product designers, and we need logistics and supply chain experts who can make sure that this happens and happens at scale and is sustainable over an extended period of time. So in essence, what we're doing is we're starting a movement here, a movement to do design for good. And to the earlier point, it isn't only an exclusive club for designers. This should be all-inclusive going forward. And through that, we believe design acting as a catalyst will drive sustainable change and positively impact the lives of millions, if not billions, going forwards as well. So that's me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. So I think I'm the last one on the introduction round. So I am Koert Bakker. I actually work for a consulting firm, PwC. We have a group called Experience Consulting, and we're basically a product and innovation studio. We do product and service strategy, design, and also realization. So we have all different disciplines together, about 40 people here in Amsterdam. So let me tell you a story about not too long after I started, actually. It was about half a year in, so we're talking about 3.5 years ago. We got a request, and the request was, could you guys visualize a carbon footprint dashboard? We have this whole idea, and we want to inform our employees about their footprint, specifically on mobility. How much they emit with their car usage and the train and the plane, etc. Because we need to do that, because then they'll change their behavior. The team had designed some interfaces, and we did some really quick user testing. That was all we could do, and out came a preferred design, and that was it. There was a gap for half a year where nothing happened, because how any corporation works. It takes a lot of stakeholder management to ultimately get things aligned. Ultimately, we got the go-ahead to move on and to make the preferred design. Well, we were able to still make some iterations, and testing was still part of the approach. I think I'm on the camera here also.
Yeah, they couldn't see you. There's
my apologies. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. That's fine. Hi, guys. Okay. So there were some additional iterations also around this idea of the dashboard that informs people about their footprint, but they were all based on the same assumption. If you show people their footprint, they will change their behavior. So there were some additional ideas like, okay, how should we change their behavior? Maybe we should match them with to carpool with their colleagues, or maybe we should offer them an office space at a WeWork, so they don't have to go to the office and not travel as much. And all was kind of lukewarm, to be honest. However, one thing we also had discovered in the initial testing of the concepts was that there were sort of two groups in a way: people who were intrinsically motivated, people who were extrinsically motivated. The extrinsic was like more comparing with other people, basically, and the intrinsic design was more around. It was literally a beautiful. I was going to show it, but I don't have to. A beautiful green leaf that got greener the greener you were. Anyway, long story short. A more important thing also, we were working agile. That was actually the key point here, because of course we gotta be quick, right? And I'm not saying agile is about being quick; it's about being flexible. But we were working in agile sprints, 2-week sprints, with a multidisciplinary team, and there was actually coding happening. The tool was being built. Luckily, there was a big data team also, because this is a complex data challenge. Just so you guys understand, you got to connect to Google Maps, timesheets, carpool. The car data, the train. I mean, there's a lot happening there. Flight booking. So the data team was working. So we were like, okay, so we can do some testing rounds. Let's go rogue, and let's do more than we were allowed to, because we could do a survey among the corporation to quantify those mindsets, because the change team was like, let's see what else we can do around the tool to stimulate people. Should it be competitive, or should it be something else? Can we do like a Tour de France style thing with yellow jerseys against those jerseys, all those types of stuff? So we did a big survey among the whole PwC population, a couple of thousand folks, and included all kinds of questions that had nothing to do with mobility at work, but they had to do with their mindset with regard to sustainability, and also their behaviors at home, whether they recycled, whether they it had impact on their investment decisions, or how they went on vacation, all that kind of stuff. And we correlated those mindsets with their mobility behavior at work with the data people, because they were working on it already. So I just used them and said like, hey guys, a little side project, let's geek out on this. Long story short, what we found out, and this took, everybody got really anxious, by the way, because this took way longer. This did not fit in those nice 2 sprints, right? That there was like, it took like 6 to 8 weeks before we got anything. However, what we found changed everything. What we found out, that the whole assumption that basically for 2 years already, the whole project was based on, if you tell people what the footprint is, they'll change the behavior, that was not true. That's not how it works. Actually, what we found is that there's a really small group of people who decides how you're going to travel. And how we uncovered it, I won't go into too much detail. We found that there's a correlation between people's mindset and any sustainability behavior at home, at work, whether you bring your own coffee cup to work, whether you turn the screens off, whether you recycle, everything, except for one topic: mobility at work. So there we were working on mobility, and it didn't work. And why is that? Because you choose your lease car and you lease before you even start your job. Yeah, you got to make that decision before you even know how much you're going to travel. Let's say you're a mid-level associate, and the project plan has been approved with the client, and you got to go to London 5 times in the next 2 months. What are you going to do? You were going to go to London in the next 5 weeks, no matter what you think, and no matter how you feel about it. It's way too late. So long story short, what we uncovered is we shouldn't make a dashboard. We should make a project management tool that helps you plan projects, budget projects, and ultimately also track projects, so that for the entire process, the decision makers can already make the right decisions in the beginning, etc. So that's what we made. It was called Footprint Insights. We won the PwC Global Innovation Award here in the Netherlands for it. We got nominated for Dutch Creativity Award, and it's currently rolled out. Well, it's in the Netherlands, but in France now, Canada, Germany, some other places. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that all of a sudden we realized, like, oh, the way we were working on this big challenge and agile, there's friction there. What I started thinking about is, okay, you got to think about agile in a different way, because this doesn't stand on its own. This is one tiny business. Well, we're a big business, but still, it's a tiny project, tiny problem within. Well, I mean, you guys introduced it already. There's so many big, complex problems going on, and who is there to solve it? Us, designers. If we can solve this. We have the methodology and the way of thinking to solve those challenges. Interpret agile differently. So instead of it being a project management tool, it's more about being agile as a business. How can you move with all those changes? So, and I'm ultimately a researcher, and I really love, Traini, what you were saying, like you want to make things practical. So that's what I want to do as well, because I believe most people want to do good things, even in corporations, but right? So you need to really make it practical and embed it in your process. So I was thinking about, okay, how can we make this part of research? Because what I discovered in this little example here, it's about defining the right problem to solve for. Because if you're like, hey, we are a corporation, we're going to solve for sustainability and carbon, that's too big. If you say like, hey, we're going to optimize project management and decision making around projects and put a price on carbon so it becomes part of how people talk about money. Okay, now I get it. Right? So how can we? So it's all about problem definition. So what we did, and then I'm going to stop, but this is an important thing to mention. So we started a program 2 years ago. It's called Tomorrow 2.0. And what we do, and it's funded by a board, and there's an agenda of big topics that we're going to tackle, where we're going to take it out of all the agile stuff, and we're going to do a research project where we make an opportunity map and see what's going on. So we've done 9 already. We've done ethical AI. We've done biodiversity, we've done financial independence of women, we've done human rights, well, and a slew of other ones. That's running, as we speak. And based on, anyway, there's too much detail for now. I could talk about it for a really, really long time. To finish it off, I'm not going to show it now, but we can talk about it later also. Based on that experience, I learned a lot about what research goals and what tools work when in the double diamond, when you work on humanity-centered problems. So we made a systems map, basically, with tools and methodologies and goals to help you decide when you're on a humanity level, human level, or user level, what's the best way to go about. So yeah, let's stop there. Looking forward to our discussion. Yeah.
Good. Where's our facilitator gone?
We can we're a multidisciplinary agile team. We can self-facilitate.
So we complete free for all now.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's okay.
We're going to try and get some questions from the panel.
You know what? I'm going to switch my computer so they can see the audience.
Good idea.
Sean, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because there seems to be good agreement that designers could play an important role, but they in fact cannot, because design is almost invariably in the middle levels of a university or a company, and therefore they have to do what they're told to do. And if you're in a design consultancy, you have to do what your client wishes. So you managed to rise to the top level of design in the C-suite, the chief design officer. And I'm saying we need more people who can do that, But most designers either are not interested or don't have the skills and capabilities, because most designers are designers. All they know is design. They don't know history. They don't know politics. They don't know administration. They don't know business. And when you say, you know, a lot of the most important decisions are political, they hate politics. And they often are trained in art schools, design and art, when artists don't like business. We have to change that. And I would like to hear your views on this topic.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a very good point. And it is, political minefield once you get into that C-suite as well, as I can tell a lot of stories once I'm outside of my NDA. But anyway, you know, what we've managed to do at the moment is get a lot of the other kind of very senior design leaders. So Mauro from PepsiCo, T-Man from General Mills, and Alistair from Logitech and others like that. But, you know, we immediately ran into issues, particularly with the tech companies, many of the software companies on the West Coast, who I won't name and shame right now, but they could not sign up to do design for good because we could not get past their C-suites. We couldn't get intellectual property lawyers because they wanted to know what was in it for them. They had to understand who would own the IP at the end of the day. And if the big tech companies, and you can probably figure out pretty quickly by exception who's not in, they are the ones who said, but we're not comfortable creating IP that we can't ultimately benefit from. Now, we've got an agreement in place with many of the companies who are participating where the IP that's generated will be assigned to the charity, to the nonprofit, and then it will in turn be assigned to the people who will benefit from it. So there's no commercial gain us and no commercial gain for the alliance members like PepsiCo or General Mills and Nestle and others. But the tech companies have struggled with that concept. But I fully agree, Don, that one of the skills we as a design profession need to it's great that you're also coming from as a non-design background, Kurt. We need to also apply our creativity to business model innovation as well, and understand that we have a contribution to make. We can help. And I was talking to a former colleague from Philips earlier that, you know, we were looking at end-to-end value chains for lifetime value for a customer experience. Now, rather than only going deep on a utility of an application, we were looking at what is the experience of buying, owning, and living with and end of life of a product. Now, in the world of capital goods, like an MRI or CT inside a hospital, of course, we're talking about multi-million-dollar installations, which during the lifetime of that product will cost millions to operate. And at the end of life, you also want to be able to capture or recapture some of that value through circular design and things like that. But we struggled initially to find designers who could. And this is where we set up a whole school of our own around service design. And this is where the UX and UI designers have now started to think differently, longitudinally about service design. And so it's a journey. I think it's up to us to also recognize as a profession, we have to skill up. One of the So Don, since you and I last spoke, I've done is team up with Harvard Business School. So the Dean of Harvard Business School, Shrikant, recognized that the CEOs coming in to get training and to understand how to run their businesses were struggling with digitization, with big data, with AI and topics like this. And the claim that Harvard was faced with was, we understand the need to digitalize our product categories. We understand that the value should be there from big data, but honestly, right now, all we see is cost. And we're finding it difficult to get down deeper than the middle management of our organization. And what we think can help, and this was what Shrikant and I talked about, was then bringing a human-centered design approach to digitalization and big data can help unlock the value and help with the transformation of the organizations to deliver the value also to their customers. So we've created a new faculty at Harvard called D3. And again, you can Google it, you can see it. And this is data, design, and digitalization combined now to drive change from the C-suite across these organizations. So by stealth, we're educating CEOs and C-suites about design thinking and the power of human-centered design. That's a contribution I've been able to make since I left Philips, but I'm sure many others are doing other things to help here as well.
I'd like to step in on this because I think Don's point's an important one, to be able to talk with business leaders and particularly in the C-suite. But I think we need, if we're going to have an impact, a positive impact on the world, we need to have a moral foundation for that. And I'm reminded of an interview with Tim Brown back in 2019, where he was asked about whether the design profession should have a moral code, a code of ethics. And he said, if we have one, it would not start with do no harm. Because if we never did harm, we would never innovate. And that just knocked me over. I mean, it kind of created this win-lose situation, that if you do no harm, you can't innovate. And if you innovate, then you should be allowed to do harm of some amount. I think if we're only talking about innovation, if we're only talking about progress or profit, without having a moral foundation, an ethical code, then we're compromised from the beginning. That human-centered design has to be a fundamentally moral process rather than a fundamentally profit-making process.
Yeah. That's why I really love what Don's sort of reframing it as humanity-centered design, because I think it sets a different context. It makes us think about perhaps the unintended consequences of what we're designing and the broader picture around the ecosystem. Because, we can all design electronic devices and not worry about where that lithium came from for the batteries and the labor that got it out of the mines and the prices that are being paid for it, and what's going to happen to it 20 years from now when it's got to be put somewhere. How are we going to deal with it?
But we're also kidding ourselves if we are leaving out the commercially driven companies from this discussion. Mm-hmm. Because the thing is, so I think what I'm hearing is you talk a lot about the nonprofits, right? They adopt this mindset, right? They're in it, they're invested. Whereas the commercialized companies, the tech companies, they're worried about who the IP belongs to, right? And that is, to me, is a symptom that they are worried about their profit. But what we need to move towards is a mindset where we think about sustainable profit rather than just profit, right? But I think we're kidding ourselves if we are leaving out the commercially driven companies from this movement, from this our mission to do better. We can't leave them out because they are driving this world forward too, and we are living in a very commercialized world, whether we like it or not. That is our reality. And I'd love to hear. Don, what is your view on that? How do we marry or merge humanity-centered design with commercially driven business? How will that happen in your view?
I do not see a conflict. That right now, though, the commercial companies are often driven by the stock market, by the shareholders, and they are the ones in the end who rule the company, because in a company, somebody always works for somebody else. And even the top person, the chief executive officer, reports to the board, and the board reports to the shareholders. And the shareholders are only interested in money, and they're only interested in short-term profit. And so many of the shareholders, they will own the shares for like 30 milliseconds and make a profit out of it. And that's crazy. So it's the problem that we I'm not against capitalism. I am strongly against what capitalism has become. And so, first of all, a company making a profit, it needs to make a profit to stay in business. No problem with that. I mean, even the nonprofit companies are making profits. It's simply not called a profit because they don't distribute it to shareholders. But you've got to keep making money, but not obscene amounts of money. And so I believe in what's called a B Corp. The traditional corporations in the United States are an S Corp and a C Corp, and they are all about the balance sheet. But a B Corp, which says we are here for betterment, and we put the community first, our employees first, the world first. Patagonia is an interesting fashion company. Fashion, by the way, is responsible for one of the largest percentages of pollution in the world. So many clothes get manufactured and never even get worn before they're discarded, and often discarded after one or two wearings. But Patagonia reuses everything, and they guarantee if your clothing is ripped or torn, give it to us and we'll fix it and send it back. And if it can't be reused, we'll use the parts. We'll take out the stuffing, we'll take out this and the other. And they are doing very well. It's a very, very successful, it's mostly for camping goods and hiking goods and so on, but they're very successful. Other companies are doing similar things. And so I have a friend who started the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado, the United States, and he said, if you can convince a company to do something because it's good for the world, it doesn't last. The first time there's an economic crisis, they stop it. So what you have to do is convince them that the way they're doing things with waste matters coming in the air and the water, the land, they're losing money. All of that is money. And if you can teach people how to redo things so that actually not only are they doing good, but they're saving money, when there's an economic crisis, they're not going to stop. If automobile manufacturers can design automobiles so that basically all the materials are reusable, yes, if designers could do that. The problem is that we take things like we bond materials together so they can't be separated, even though each material itself is reusable. You know, the easiest things to reuse is metal, can be melted down and reused, and glass can be melted down and reused. And yet when we bond them together to make exotic new materials, it becomes unusable. And so I believe that it is possible to do good if we reconsider how we are working without leaving the profit-making companies, because making a profit is not evil by itself. It's what you do with it. It's how you do it. It's whether it's an obscene amount, whether there's a huge discrepancy in salaries between the people at the very top and the very bottom. But none of those are fundamental to capitalism. So we could change. And by the way, I want to make a completely different comment. There's a number of people in the chat who are concerned about diversity. And I am very concerned. And I say this as an old white male establishment member. And I am trying to make a difference. And some people have been attacking me, not because of anything I'm doing or saying, but simply because I'm an old white male establishment person and I don't have the right to work on these issues. Or because of things I said 20 years ago, not recognizing that, yeah, I said things 20 years ago I would never say today. But we all learn. Isn't it important that when somebody learns and changes with their views and goes on, isn't that to be counted? No, it isn't. But this panel is not a good example of what we need to do in the world. We're all white. We're all older. We're all part of the establishment. Come on, we need to have diversity of all sorts, ages, colors, creeds, beliefs, religions, and points of view.
Absolutely.
Don, some of us are older than others, but on the panel.
The oldest here, I'm sure.
I totally agree with you, both about the need for diversity among in our profession. I think that's changing as younger people get to be older and more established. I also agree with you about capitalism and that it's not fundamentally evil. But at the same time, there are so many forces within capitalism that move towards maximizing profits, among other maximizations. And that brings in politics, regulation, and so forth. We need to, as you point out earlier, keep in mind that that there are these externalities that that companies often evoke. That if polluting loses money and it's somebody else's money, then there's a high degree of pressure to do that, and that can be self-reinforcing. So it may be necessary to design public policies through political means that constrain businesses in a way that goes beyond the market.
Awesome.
But I think it's so important that we listen to the concerns of the commercially driven companies. Listen to their concerns. That's the first thing. We can't just leave them out because they have concerns about their profit. We need to listen to those concerns. And the next thing is to educate them on all the great things that come with long-term sustainable profit. Because it's actually, I very much agree with you, Don. It's not either or. It's not either we make a profit or we are humanity-centered or ethical. It's not either or. It's yes and, right? But we need to address those concerns, because if we don't address the concerns, they'll just leave the conversation flat out. If they can't be guaranteed that they will still make a profit and that their profit won't be hurt long term, they will just leave that discussion and go on with their own agenda, which is what we don't want them to do, right? Because then we're essentially just not addressing, the big machine that kind of makes everything go round. That was my point with that question.
A lot of it's also about collaboration, right? Like, as much as I agree that as designers we can do these things, but I also know we can't do it alone. And we don't have to become the business. Designers don't have to become the business people. They can work with business people. So you need all these different talents together also to make that happen. So I think that's one thing that I think that's really important there. And another thing, and I also agree on the regulations piece. I mean, of course, there is more and more regulation coming. I'm not saying it's enough, but companies are hit here in the EU for sure on the E, the S, and the G, with all kinds of regulations that are coming their way. But also some companies are also seeing that actually they need to do more than that. And it's actually also, for whatever reason it is, right? Either it's to preemptively anticipate where things are going and put it in motion now, or maybe they try to differentiate themselves competitively. There's movement there, and regulation is definitely a really important stick, though, whether it's about privacy or climate or social things, yeah.
Well, when we started out with Design for Good, we had this cohort of the West Coast technology companies, the ones you would expect. And we very quickly ran into that barrier about, well, how about the IP? How are we going to make money out of this and all the rest of it? We could have stopped. We could have just said, hey, you know what? You're right. This is never going to work. We will never get the intellectual property people to agree. We didn't. We decided to go forward with big companies. I mean, look at the size of General Mills, Nestle, PepsiCo. These are huge, huge companies. Now, okay, they're packaged goods, but we also found some enlightened technology companies like Logitech and Philips who would agree to go forwards. And we said, well, on the basis of that, let's get moving. Let's make a start. And at least then we can start to demonstrate the value, understand the problems that we face down the line, and then we'll go back and revisit those guys who wouldn't come in the first round and see if we can't get them on board. Now, what's happening is we're actually getting approached by individuals. And it's not only designers, it's chief marketing officers, directors of marketing, heads of sustainability, heads of circularity from those very same tech companies who've seen what we're doing and now want to be a part of it. And we've actually just come to an agreement with an Indian subordinate, if you like, of it. So the Indian company of one of those West Coast areas who've said, you know what, we don't need to ask permission from head office. We're in. We will contribute. We will put our design team and our marketeers and developers involved in this for next year. So whilst head office is still figuring it out, the Indian team is already getting involved. So we just make a start. And I think, you know, with the Patagonia example and many other companies who are not subservient to shareholders like IKEA, H&M, and other companies, we can get moving and we can start to make an impact.
And the B Corp movement is exploding. They've seen insane searches in companies interested in actually applying to become a B Corporation. So it's very interesting to actually follow that development.
Yeah. Well, eventually those that aren't involved will increasingly come under pressure from their shareholders who are putting together more sustainable indexes, circularity indexes. ESG will not just be a buzzword anymore. They will be held accountable. They'll have to show real impact from them. Yeah,
legislation is just around the corner, even if it's for initially for the enterprises. The enterprises are they need to have, you know, data from their suppliers that prove that they are actually being held accountable. So everything is going to sort of sift down through the entire ecosystem of enterprises to other layers of smaller companies. So yeah, the pressure is on, you know, just around the corner, which is great.
Questions maybe?
Yeah,
maybe on the line. Maybe
I saw there is a hand in the audience.
There are a few hands here.
Gerard Fox, I see your hand. I'm not sure if I see others. Do you want? I don't know if you can unmute and.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Just let me put on my camera so I'm not being rude.
There you go. We see you.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I mean it's all super good stuff and really, really interesting. And I think it's great to see that these things are becoming, you know, more and more mainstream and people in the sector are asking the right questions and so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of the talk today is kind of, say, from bottom up and sideways in and maybe inside out in terms of the way the right decisions can be kind of made, encouraged, incentivized, discouraged, etc., etc., and that's all good. I'm wondering what the panel's thoughts are on the very, very top level stuff. So if you look at what's happening in politics, we now have a scenario where I think it's fair to say representational democracy has kind of, in some respects, come under stress. And it is not necessarily possibly the best way to go forward in general. And if we look at what's been happening in terms of participatory democracy, citizens' assemblies, etc., who in effect run their own kind of version, even though designers aren't involved, but they kind of use a lot of the principles that designers use in co-design and participatory design. My first assertion, I suppose, would be, is that not something for exploration from the design community in terms of their co-design skills, their facilitation skills, their expertise around models and methods, etc., in terms of contributing to the development of that kind of activity with political scientists, behavioral scientists, etc., that whole broad spectrum of interdisciplinarity, because I think, you know, one of the big things that's discussed a lot is systems change, radical systems change. And I think if you asked the man in the street in certainly most Western countries and increasingly a lot of countries beyond that, I mean, I think everybody's in agreement that something needs to be done. And politics goes around and around in circles with people who just turn up at the G8 or at at Davos or whatever it is, and they all agree the same thing again, but slightly more severely or whatever. And, you know, we go round and round and round. I mean, I would just cite, I mean, you can probably hear from my accent, I'm Irish. I would cite we've had a number of citizens' assemblies in very, very historically contentious kind of areas in the last number of years, gay marriage and birth termination or fetal termination. And despite heavy legacy of church interference, colonialism, very, very strong Catholic Church, etc., citizens' assemblies, 100 citizens picked on a model designed by the academic community in UCD. They managed to, hold a citizens' assembly for 100 odd days, informed experts, data, evidence, very, very objective stuff. And then there was a referendum, and the citizens made, I suppose, a fairly contemporary choice. So I suppose, yeah, democracy, big stuff at the top. And then the second point I'd make, I'll finish now, education and universal design literacy. You read all the time, you know, numeracy literacy, creative problem solving literacy. If you look at the World Economic Forum's, you know, top 10 skills going forward as a citizen in the world, it's all pretty much design skills. So just, is there a place for advocating for design literacy for everyone? Because I think I'm a design educator for 20 years. You don't need to be able to draw or be good at color to be a good problem solver. And I think there's an enormous amount of crowdsourcing that could be done. The likes of Polis, POL.is, digital platforms that allow citizen participation, etc. So a lot of stuff there. I'll stop now, but I think I'm wondering what the panel's thoughts are in general, that sort of top-down, sideways-in approach to the kind of the macro pillars or the meta pillars. It's me done.
Yes. Yes, of course. Yeah. Don or Bob, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, politics is very important because, in my opinion, the good side of politics and what politics should be about is people getting together with different opinions, different points of view, but still trying to change something. And so recognizing they have to collaborate with each other and agree and often compromise to get something done. And on top of that, often if different views can get together and actually talk to each other, sometimes you can find a solution where there's no compromise required. But politics today has reached a point where people don't even listen to each other. There's no discussion, no debate. And in fact, the whole point of a discussion is to change somebody's opinion. But if somebody changes their opinion, then all of their colleagues yell at them. What are you doing? Well, you know, what I learned in science is when I get new data, I change my opinion. That's the whole point. I've been changing my mind continually for my lifetime, getting better, getting smarter because I listen to what other people say. And I'm fond of saying when somebody tells me I did something well, that's nice, but I don't learn anything. When somebody tells me I was wrong, that's good. And I try to understand why they say I'm wrong and learn from that. But we don't see that in today's political world. But there are two things that politicians listen to because they want to stay in power, usually. One of them is money, which helps them stay in power, but the other one is voting. In all the kinds of democracies, whether it's participatory or representative or whatever, it's still the votes that count. And the problem is that quite often the people we don't necessarily like are the ones who are much better organized. Well, we have to organize because politicians do listen to votes. And if we can organize ourselves in massive numbers, we can make a difference even on the political scheme. It's not easy, but no important problem is ever easy.
I agree with you, Don. I think the solution needs to be a local one. That is, when you get two or more people together, it's much more likely they're going to talk to each other respectfully and constructively. And I'd like to cite an organization that I've been involved in recently called Braver Angels, which is an organization here in the States it's a national organization and becoming international, I believe, but it's a network of local chapters. And the function of the local chapters is to bring people together in equal numbers of conservatives and liberals or reds and blues to talk to each other in respectful ways around issues that they may disagree on in fundamental and perhaps even passionate ways. But the notion is to design, if you will, experiences, exercises where these people talk to each other in respectful and productive ways. And I think there are a whole series of experiences, of workshops that they have designed for that purpose. And I think that there are ways that we can address some of the political problems that we're confronted with in a designful way that supports building relationships and communities, even among, and particularly among people that disagree with each other and yet are in the same situation. And I think this also speaks to a point Sean made earlier about the need to address things locally, because problems, even universal problems like climate change, get played out in local ways, and quite differently in the Southwest of the United States than the Plain States or the Northwest, or so that these are need to be addressed in fundamentally local ways by engaging people to address these problems locally.
Gerard, you asked what our opinion was on the top-down versus bottom-up and sort of sideways in. I think we need all of it to succeed. Because politics, even whether we like it or not, and whether we like them or not, they are the only ones who can help us with regulation. And regulation is very effective for regulating unhealthy capitalism. And we need that help. We can't solve everything bottom up or inside out, even if we educate designers to become better business people. Even if we manage to do as Don addresses, push or educate and help designers move into senior positions, into the C-suite level, because that's where we need them the most. We can't do that we can't solve the problem without regulation. And what I actually found interesting is, Sean, you mentioned that there was a company in India, an India-based company, who actually bought in on your initiative, which to me is probably the most interesting insight that I've received recently. Because the thing is, in Europe we have heavy regulation, we have GDPR, we have in the US, we're really starting to see heavy regulation in the tech space, for instance. But in India, they don't have this. So really, they didn't have to. In Europe and in an increasing amount of the US, they need to start complying. In India, they don't have to. But the fact that this company is choosing to is super, super interesting. But my perspective is we need regulation, we need politics just as much as we need the inside out sort of massaging of organizations and maturing of organizations into this transformation towards humanizing or making design more human-centered, because one can't do without the other. That's my clear perspective on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that Indian example, another thing that I just discovered recently was, much of the AI that is being trained today, particularly in the medical field, the input is coming from human beings, ultimately. They're doing the training, and guess where they're sitting? It isn't in North America, it isn't in Europe, it isn't in Germany or France or UK. It's in India, it's in Indonesia, it's in Thailand, it's in Vietnam, where they don't have the same GDPR oversight or the control of the data, personal data, that we see in many of these other places. So the medical AI that you may be using is based on data that's coming from those countries. And you can figure out why, but how accurate is that for when you're treating a North American consumer or a patient or a German? So if it's based on a model which is based on an Indian patient and cohorts of patients, what are the differences? What are the similarities? So I think there's all sorts of ethical questions that come on the back of this as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. I think we had one more question from the audience. Jim Jurovich, you had a question too?
Yes, I do. Thank you. First of all, if you're looking for people of color for the design world, I work with a lot of people all over Africa. I think you can find a plethora of talent in Africa. Secondly, the reference, Sean, you only touched on it slightly, was to ESGs. I think ESGs play a very important role in design. I know in the United States here we're trying to block it, but the reality is what I'm hearing from the rest of the world is that it's a $40 trillion industry, and it's very well endorsed. And obviously, I think it's something that matches up well with the SDGs. So, Sean, I would appreciate it if you could speak a little deeper to the ESG role in design.
Yeah, I think, again, it's back to what Don was saying, that, follow the money. Who's driving this kind of behavior? And a lot of it is the capital markets, so the shareholders, the investors. And increasingly, you see people are looking to put their money behind companies which are respectful of those ESG commitments. They want to know that they're not fueling the next environmental disaster, that their shares are going to be secure in that as well. And there are also I've come across more recently, venture capital groups who are built on the basis that they will fund only companies that they see as having the potential to do and not do damage as well. So we're starting to see that movement increasingly happening. But there's still an enormous amount of greenwashing going on by the incumbents, by the big companies, by the big corporates. But they are being found out slowly, and for sure it will happen increasingly. But again, that comes back to the politics. And do we have the governance in place? Do we have the regulations in place that prevent that sort of greenwashing as well?
In the United States, we have individual states who are starting to pass regulations that say it is not permitted for a financial advisor to take ESG into consideration. The financial advisors should simply be trying to maximize the amount of money that the investors receive. This is really the enemy, if you will. We have to overcome this kind of, how horrible that you think about societal needs. It's all about how much money you get.
Yeah. And I mean, there are many in our community who are working within these financial companies as well, within the banks, within the big corporations, including I came across a team the other day who were working for the London Stock Exchange. So try and get your elbows sharpened, get in there, start to rock the boat, start to ask difficult questions and see what you can do. Maybe you only have a small ripple at the beginning, but maybe eventually some of what you say will start to have an impact. Sorry, you.
No, I was just thinking that, much of this is also related to the metric of success that still are very much valuable for us. I think we are, despite the lack of diversity in this panel, I think it's a good reflection of everything else. Yeah. diversity. So we are stuck in a system where we think that the only metric of success is profit, or is, these are the KPIs that are on the agenda of all the C-suites. They have to make a certain number of KPI, or increase in the NPS score, or this or that. I think we have to open up a little bit more, or much more, to the inputs that can come from other systems of belief. We are all sharing the same context, and that's the only context that we know. So I like when you're saying, let's take some companies that are able to, or willing to put some effort and trying to see how they can work in a different way.
Yeah.
And let's start from there, because I think we have to really redefine a little bit of much of what success means. It's not just profit, is growth. But what is growth? Growth is not only money, it's also long-term life cycle of the products, but also, how we educate people to understand that, making a lot of money is not the only thing that can make you successful. It's, I think we are obliged to adopt other system of understanding. So the more we can open up the floor, even us as designers, the more we can work with other kind of communities, other kind of creative people that are not just coming out of schools of designs. I think we will be able to revisit a little bit, unlearn some of the things we know, and learn other things that are more useful now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, creativity isn't, we don't have exclusive rights to that as designers. And the more we can enable creativity within those economic professions, political professions, business schools, then the better. Yeah. Yeah, there's maybe, that exists, of course, yeah.
No, but I agree. The systems thinking is also really important. When you design something, also just thinking about what's it going to do later in society, like the example you gave about the packaging, or those are things you can do right now. Think about the ripple effect. Even if you work on something small, those are things you can do as a designer right from the beginning. And because I'm a big believer in thinking big but doing small, if that makes sense. Like for some clients, we've actually made systems maps. Like we talked about the supply chain example here a little bit. So we've made a systems map with all the stakeholders in there, all the from consumer all the way through who are the players at the corporation side, through who are the people we can't see in the fields, like the entire chain. But then you can't solve for that whole thing right away. But at least you start to understand how things work together, and make it into micro problems. Like one micro problem, how can we make visible what's happening? Who's being affected. So actually, now there are tools in the marketplace where with AI you can at least help companies predict where most likely their suppliers might be and where the risks are, so they can go there and see and assess. So you can build a product for that. Etc. How do you get a consumer? How can you nudge a consumer to be willing to pay 5 or 10 euro more for a sustainable T-shirt? You can do a project around that. So you can really identify in your chain, and then slowly but surely you can change that system. But you have to make it practical, tangible, something you can work on, and measurable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And local.
The
other thing I really struggled with is, and I think again, we made our life comfortable, but I think this, to define what design for good is, I started to think about where design fails and what is not designed for good. So for me, we are failing every time we only design for people like us, or when we don't consider a lot of other things, when we want to generalize and design for something that always works instead of designing for something that works here and now, because that's what I'm trying to solve. So I think AI can do a great job in solving what works for everybody. But then we, humans, designers that work in, humanity-centered design, we have to work for what is specific to this part of the planet where I am, to the problems that I can manage. You know, I cannot solve everything. I can solve this. And I have to start from this. If I want to, if we all do this somewhere, then things are going to go better, most likely. But I think, yeah, finding a model that works for everyone is no more a practice we can apply.
Yes, yeah.
And points regarding design manager at and I've mentored and led and managed a lot of designers over the years, and one of the things that I've noticed is that they're in the capabilities of the designer, like they have a lot of ideas and they come up with these ideas that are world changing. Booking.com is a company that has a global that can do a lot of good, but then they have these ideas that there were tons of ideas on the table, but the things that actually came to materialization are very, very few, and those were taken like it takes like months in discussions and convincing and things like that, because I think the perception of design is wrong in a lot of places. So people don't perceive design as a problem-solving function. They perceive design as a graphic function or
beautification.
And I think that, like, I want to know, like, the panelists' opinion about how can we, as designers, how can we empower other designers, if we are managers, to make that, to change the perception of design, so we can actually use our skills, because we can elevate the skills until a certain point, but if we don't use it, it's just like pointless, right? So how can we let more of our skills actually impact design organizations?
Don, did you want to dive in on this one? Did you hear the question? Sorry.
No, I could. This is a person in the audience and not near a microphone.
Okay, sorry. She's coming from Booking.com, and again, the large design team, very talented design team with lots of great ideas, but those great ideas often were either not taken on board or took months and months of deliberation before they would move forwards. And how can we change that? Yeah.
Well, my feeling is that who defined that it was a great idea? That quite often I find that designers do not know how to talk to their executives in their businesses. What they want to do is they talk about the wonderful value they're doing and the beautiful designs they've done and the prizes they've won. And that's not what convinces an executive.
I completely agree with you. So I have that's not the question. I would just want to repeat the question, because I think that, like, I completely agree with you. I've been a design manager at Booking, and one of my things that I was doing was actually pushing those things with higher management and convincing them to listen to their ideas. But I think that, like, what I was saying was that one of the biggest obstacles that I had was the perception of design. So design was not perceived as a problem-solving function, but more as an aesthetic function. And changing that mindset is taking a lot of time, especially in, like, established organizations where there are already some view of how design should be, or how they think design should be. And the more we elevate the design function, the more we learn, the more we develop it, the bigger gap we have with actual organization leaders. So my question was, how, in your opinion, can we make this mindset maybe faster, maybe contribute to it, maybe, like, how can we do something in order to make our opinions or ideas or thoughts or design thinking more integrated in the organization?
Thank you. By the way, this time I could hear you clearly and specifically. Thank you for moving. I'm involved right now in a project. A number of people wanted to honor me, and so we're putting together a contest, actually. They wanted to give a design award to a major designer who had done some good, and I said, no, it does no good. So what we're trying to do, and Sean, I want to talk to you in Design for Good about some kind of partnership, is that we want to recognize young, early career designers, not who have done a design, but who have actually done a real working project in society, the UN 17 Sustainable Development issues, with evidence that they're making a difference. And I have a board of advisors helping me. And one of the things my board of advisors yelled at me was, don't call it design. Because nobody knows what design means. People think, well, we have hairdressers who are designers, and we have, all sorts of designers. And moreover, people always think that design is something you call in at the end to make it look pretty. Now, that hasn't been true for quite a while. And, whatever you think of the design thinking movement that came out of Stanford and IDEO, the D School, the very fact that they tried to publicize design thinking was really valuable. I know that what they did was often superficial and trite, but nonetheless, when you say designers, the way that designers think is very valuable, and we should teach it in business schools here, that's going a big step in the direction that you care about. People are starting to recognize that designers are not just doing things pretty. And as I point out, if I'm going to do a new sewer system or sanitation system or public health or educational system, the fact that I can't draw worth a damn doesn't matter. It's not about aesthetics. It's about rethinking the issues. But why doesn't the world know this? Well, maybe it's the design profession's fault. We need, instead of design museums, show the pretty stuff, because what else can you show in a museum? So. Yeah. But we also don't have enough designers who are publishing in things that everyday people read or things that executives read, which talks about what the value of design is. That's starting to happen in things like the Harvard Business Review occasionally, but we don't have popular books that become world bestsellers about the power of design, and world bestsellers to the executives. That's what matters. And so we need to do more communication. Because design has changed, and it's now much more than simply the superficial outside. But the world doesn't know that yet. But that may be our fault for not figuring out how we can communicate the new approach to design, new meaning the last 50 years.
Yeah. No, and I think that...
Yeah, I agree with that, Don. And I think that we as a design profession do need to rethink what we call design. And I think it's embedded in the double diamond model, which ends with delivery. And we need to go beyond that. We need to look at impact. And we need to measure impact in ways that are meaningful to people in their lives, as well as the C-suite. So I think that that we have to go beyond the aesthetics, even the functionality of the design, the look and feel, to look at the impact that it's having on people's lives, on the economy, on the environment, in order to claim an important role in the whole enterprise.
Yeah. But I think you're right there. I think it goes beyond that double diamond. I think we've got to start finding new ways of framing that. I mean, one of the things I've been looking at is using that kind of, not sure what to call it, an infinity loop. So you still go through all the phases of deciding, discovery, designing, developing, implementing, prototyping, etc. But you loop it back, because the journey begins again once you release that product into the wild. Your learning opportunities expand again. Particularly now we have IoT, and we can start to collect data. We can get real-time understanding of what our users are doing with the product in real world. I mean, this is a fantastic creative resource that we now have at our fingertips. You that are involved in the digital world have known this for years. As product designers, as industrial designers, we're just discovering the opportunity that now comes our way. And again, to your point, thinking about lifetime value of a product, including end of life of a product, is something we all need to be doing. And this does resonate with the C-suites and the business owners. And all too often, we preach to the converted. We're talking here to an audience of UX designers, and some of you are coming outside of design training. So that's fantastic. But we need to be in there talking to the business schools, to the people who are graduating in economics and business studies, so that we embed some thinking, some principles with those guys as well. And you know, the beauty parade that is the design awards, I also do agree that we've got to challenge that. Next year or this year, I'm the chairman of a new award called the Design Effectiveness Awards by the Design Business Association. The ticket to entry is 2 years of data. So you prove that design did deliver value, and you show the statistics based on the ROI of the investment made. And the judging panel is made up of CEOs of companies, not designers, because designers, we struggle to go beyond whether the font, the color selection, the typography, the grid, the layout, the form factor. We get hung up on those aesthetic details, but you put a bunch of CEOs in the room and they will interrogate that data to make sure that it did deliver the value that we set out to do. And so when you win a Design Effectiveness Award in the future, that should be a medal we really celebrate with pride.
By the way, the double diamond is basically wrong, completely wrong. And I've actually talked to the chief design officer of the London Design Council, English, and who agrees, by the way. It's a good way of teaching people things, but those of you in the field, have you ever been able to do the first diamond? No, because since designers have nothing to do with stating what the company, except at Philips. And so I told Sean when I went to Philips, I thought I had gone to heaven, because for the first time, designers actually stated what the product ought to be. But in most companies, somebody up above, usually the marketing and salespeople, decide what the product should be. And then it's given to the design team. And then, as I point out, the day the product team is assembled, they are behind schedule and over their budget. And so when you want to do that first diamond, you're told, no, we don't have time, we don't have money. But next time, they say, next time, because we know it's really important. But there is never a next time. And so the point is, we need to actually organize design structure differently so that on the side, people are always doing the design research. So when the product team comes out, they've already done the proper research. Second of all, why aren't the designers in the decision roles helping decide what that product ought to be in the first place, using their design research to do informed analysis? That's rare in companies, very, very rare. So the double diamond, it's really wonderful. I teach it, it's in my books, and it's wrong.
Yes.
I have to say, though, it really, I mean, we emphasize a lot. I mean, I totally agree on the fact that
But PwC is not a manufacturing company. You're not making real products, so come on.
No, we don't make physical products. But we do solve problems, right? And which problems? Well, that's often the key part. I mean, I think we all would probably recognize a client coming to us with a brief, only to realize either initially or after a little while that the brief's wrong. And that actually the problem that they came in with, that there's something else going on, that there's more to it. I mean, that's very, very common, right? So
yeah, my philosophy is never solve the problem I'm asked to solve, because invariably it's the wrong problem. Yeah, so it's usually a symptom. So if you go in and you find out the real core, the problem disappears. But very few people are given the opportunity to do that, to back up and say, what's really behind this?
No, that's true. But of course, being a consulting firm, being a consulting firm, it's something that is more part of what we do. We're gonna, can we see, so we flip to you? Okay. Yeah, let's flip that one. Yeah.
We'll flip this one.
Okay. Because I think they use the designs to reflect the solution. So you interact with the designs like, this is the solution, this is how it looks like, but nobody's about return of investment of the design for the real problem that underlies the solution. And therefore you constantly talk about how nice, how pretty it all looks, but never talk about the return on investment that the design delivered to the real users. Nobody's talking about that. They talk about the designs. No?
I think that, like, one of the
now you come.
But one of the so I'm a very strong advocate for for putting design in early stages, using design as a strategic role. I opened my own strategic design consultancy. Like I'm really into that part, and I was doing that at Booking as well. But there is like something that like you say this to people. You go to product managers, you go to CEOs and CTOs and people with like with a lot of impact, and you tell them like, hey, this is what we can do. This is what we can deliver. We can shorten your timelines in like half. We can impact. We can get your conversion doubled, and they kind of like don't want to buy into it because like, hey, but you are a designer. How? So that's kind of like the space where.
But they use the designs as an interface of the solution. So you're interacting about the wrong stuff. I think designs is a consequence of something, and the underlying problem needs to be solved, and you need to interact about the problem. My work is 90% problem.
Like solving the problem, in your opinion, is not part of the design.
But you're talking about making sure you've identified the real problem.
Because you interact about the real problem, and then you agree all about are we agreeing or disagreeing about the problem. Not so much about look at this interface and it reflects a solution for that user, and he will be very happy because it's flashy and stuff. The last thing you said.
You know, like systems map I talked about earlier. It's all about separating problem from solution.
Yeah, and here we all talk about books, solution, and my work is 90% problem. Looking identifying the problem, like the whys and all that stuff. No, so. A real icon there in the front of me.
No, but it's a very good point, because I think, as we've optimized design teams and systems and, got really swallowed up in the world of agile and lean and everything else, we're kind of neglecting some of those core skills, like design researchers and the ability to stop and think and process and synthesize and collate disparate amounts of information. That's where the magic happens, isn't it? If you dive straight into rapid prototyping and iterating, are you working on the right problem to begin with?
I have a different means to reflect a solution.
Yes.
I use different methods, different tools than a design to reflect, like, look, we had this problem, therefore this is the solution. You can do it differently. You can use different interface to interact with different stakeholders to reflect the new problem.
Thank you for just summarizing my talk, by the way.
Sorry.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on top, but why should the idea come from the designer? Like I hear too many times, and I live this myself, or some people in my teams, of course, are frustrated. And how can we defend design? But why should we defend design? How can we empower everyone to understand more of what we do, instead of we have created a fantastic bubble of isolation, We invented our jargon, we invented our ways of working, we don't share with anyone, we work in our corner, and then we go and we present, ta-da! Of course, people think that this is da-da. Design is ta-da. No, it's not ta-da. It's all the process that is behind. So when I introduce myself, I can say, yes, of course, I'm Carla. Nice to meet you. I'm director of design at Frog. And I see in their faces, why is she sitting in this meeting? Yeah. And then I say, you know what? Forget about my function and let's talk about your problem. How can I help you? Because, there are a few things I'm good at. I'm good at understanding problems. I'm good at aligning teams that are not communicating. I'm good at seeing what's not working in a situation. So tell me about your situation. Let's see what I can do. And then they understand it differently. Or, if you bring them in the process of work with you, I very much count on the IKEA effect. When you build up a shelf, you keep your Billy for 30 years in your house, even if you move, because you made it. So I do the same with them. Let's try to do it together. Then when they experience, especially, as I said before, people don't like discomfort. Our brains don't like chaos. So when we are diverging, that's where their faces go, now you find me a nice solution immediately, and there we go, this is design. That's where design plays a role. Now I align all the Lego in the right place, and now we build up the house. That's what we do. And you cannot do it yourself.
And that's also why we only talk about sunny day scenarios in design and innovation, right? We never talk about rainy days, but we should talk about the rainy days. What could go wrong and how can we prevent that, right? We never ask that question. If we just instilled that one question, what could go wrong, and the follow-up, what can we do to prevent that from happening? We would be in a very different place than we are right now in the way that we innovate and push things to market and then let it live for a while and then realize, we made a mistake. We better go back and fix this, right? If we start to try fixing things, at least some of it, before we ship, we will be in a much better space in terms of positive impact than we are right now, generally speaking, in innovation and design.
You just triggered
me for interrupting, but unfortunately, this is the morning and I have a really packed schedule. And I had told people I would stop at 9 a.m. California time to do the other activities that are scheduled on my calendar. And it's now 25 minutes after 9 a.m. So I really have to go. And I apologize because it's a wonderful discussion and I'm really excited by it. But I'm sorry, my life. I've only retired 5 times, so I'm still very, very, very busy.
You're not very good at retiring, Don.
I know I failed. Yeah. But actually, retirement means I can do what I am interested in, which is exactly the sort of things we've been talking about. So actually, 2 comments. One is to Jim Jurowitz. If you're still there, could you send me an email? I would like to talk to you about your contacts in Africa. And Sean, I tried to send you an email, but since you left Philips, I don't know your email address. So write to me and let's talk.
Okay.
And
yeah, Don, I need your email. I tried connecting with you on LinkedIn and it asked for your email address and it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I've had that problem. So I'm Don at jnd.org. That's just noticeably different. It's a psychological term. Julie, just noticeably different. Yeah, okay, jnd.org, and I'm Don.
All right, I'll send you that information, Don. Thank you.
Great. And my website, by the way, is jnd.org, which has all sorts of stuff on it. So thank you, but I really must go, and I apologize.
It was great being on the panel with you, Don, and look forward to doing it in person in Milan in just a few weeks.
Just a few weeks. Actually, well, in October. But when I was reading the draft of Bob's book, I told my wife, I'm reading my book, except it's written by somebody else. We were thinking very similar lines. So, bye.
Bye-bye.